Way and Navajo, my father. And my story starts at the age of 13. I was sexually assaulted. This was in the year 1991. The way things started out was it was a alcohol facilitated sexual assault. I do remember everything that happened, and the way my day started on that day, which was June 11th, I started out like any other day. You know, I was playing in a softball tournament, and the afternoon we returned home, and it was me and one of my relatives. We returned home after playing in a tournament all day, and we went to a mutual acquaintance house, and he was older. They were planning to have a party. There was a birthday party that they wanted to celebrate, and it was just going to be me, my other relative, and these two male older men. They were going to be the ones supplying the alcohol. So we go over and, you know, we kind of have our day. The evening we start drinking. Throughout that night, I started to notice the person I was with was getting really intoxicated, and I was feeling it too. But at this point, I started not really drinking the whiskey anymore. And I started to say, you know, we probably should go. And so after a while, we finally said, okay, let's go ahead and go home, because we were going to have to walk a ways. So we start to leave, and the house, it's like it has a porch, but it's an enclosed porch. So we get to the front door and we start to make our way out, and my relative goes out ahead of me, and I'm behind her walking, and just as she's kind of crossing that threshold of the door, the older guy, he pushes her out, and he closes the door. And that's when I first realized, you know, I was in trouble. Up until that point, I didn't feel afraid or anything, but when those doors closed and she was pushed out, I knew I was in trouble. And there was like a sliding door, a window, like a big window next to the door, and she had opened it. And my relative, you know, she stuck her head back in, and I remember telling her, you know, go get help, you know, help me. And this man just kind of closed the window again, and he locked it. And that's where things started. You know, he dragged me down this hallway to the back bedroom. The other male that was there, he was passed out. He had drank too much, so he was passed out, and it just left me and him in the house. I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know if my relative was going to come back with help, if she was even going to come back. You know, we just go into this room, and he throws me on the bed, and we lay there for a while. It took maybe about 15 minutes, and I kept thinking maybe he'll pass out, you know, so I just laid there. But it didn't, you know, he didn't pass out. And that's where things changed, and you know, things started. Up until this point, I was a virgin, so I had never had sex or anything like that. And you know, he just started ripping my clothes off of me. I was a really small frame girl, and he just became violent. You know, he just started ripping my clothes off, and he started sexually assaulting me. I won't share into too much detail about what happened. You know, I'll just let you know that whatever could happen sexually happened. Anything and everything that could be done sexually was done to me. A lot of it hurt. There was a point where he was forcing me to give him oral sex, and I ended up throwing up on him. And instead of him stopping or anything, you know, he just kind of roughed me up a little, and then he just wiped himself off, and you know, he put toothpaste on his private parts and continued to force me to do what he wanted me to finish. I don't know if he thought maybe I threw up because it tasted gross or what, and that's why he put toothpaste on it. I don't know, but to this day, you know, that specific type of toothpaste I won't ever use, and I don't allow it in my household, not even anything with the name of that toothpaste brand. But it took several hours of this going on, you know. I screamed, I fought, I did everything to try and get help. But, you know, nothing happened. No help ever came. And the abuse continued. If he got frustrated with me or whatever, you know, he choked me, he hit me. And it just came to a point where I would just get quiet and I would just go along with what he wanted me to do. I don't know, it seemed like forever, but there was a point in the night where there was this figure at the door, you know, and a male's voice spoke and said, "Are you okay?" And things kind of stopped, and, you know, our focus became the doorway, and the light came on. And I recognized the man as the neighbor of his. And the guy, you know, tells him, "Hey, do you want some of this?" And I guess if I should take it back, before this happened, there was actually people that came to the house. They knocked on the door, and he actually went to answer it. And he told me before going into the living room, you know, I needed to be quiet and don't say anything or I'll regret it. So I laid there, and in this house, the room windows were pretty high up and they were really small. So I laid there thinking of ways I could get out. Like, could I actually make it out that small window? What was below it? What would happen? Would he hear me? Where are my clothes? You know, all kinds of things ran through my head. And so I ended up just staying quiet. And some of the thoughts that crossed my mind was, you know, if I do go ask for help with these people that are in the living room, you know, is he going to offer me to them? And is it going to make things worse for me? And although I heard female voices, I still was afraid. You know, I didn't know what to expect. So I didn't scream for help, or I didn't ask anybody for help. I just laid there. Once they left, he came back in the room, you know, and things resumed. But when I go back to the guy, you know, coming to the doorway and asking if we're okay, you know, that validated my thoughts, you know, because he did offer me to him. You know, he said, "Do you want in on this?" And the man, of course, he said no, and he kept looking at me, and he's like, "Are you okay?" And I kept asking him, you know, "Help me." And then by this time I was really thirsty, and I was telling him, "Can you get me some water?" And the guy was asking him, you know, "Go get her some more beer, go get her some more liquor." And I kept saying, no, I just want water. There came that moment where there was an opening of him letting me go, and I had a good distance away from him on the bed. You know, of course, I was I was completely naked, but I just stood, and this man standing at the door, and you know, I was just kind of done, and so I just told myself, you know, just run and see what happens. He didn't have that grasp on me. He didn't, you know, he was naked himself. And I felt like this man was wanting to help me. So I did. I ran. I ran and I made it past him. And at that moment, I realized I was free. And I ran as fast as I could. I ran to my aunt's house. I remember banging on the door. I remember banging on the door and nobody answering. And I could hear the dogs barking in the background. And I remember seeing him coming around that corner of my aunt's trailer and screaming even harder and begging harder. And just as he's grabbing me I can feel him grabbing the door opens and he lets go and he runs. And my sister, she was the other person on the other end of the door, and she kind of pulled me in and she closed the door, and I remember just running and grabbing clothes because I was naked, and my sister screaming, "What happened? Who was that?" And she's just freaked out, and her friend was there sleeping over, and so she runs and calls the police. And the police show up pretty fast, and they take me. The police come and they take me, and they tell my sister she couldn't come with me because they needed her to go back to this house to identify my clothing. And so I have to go alone, and I go to the hospital, and they take me in the ER and they sit me down and they tell me just wait there. And I remember the ER, it was in our old hospital, so it was really small. It was completely dark. There was just office lights and like lights on in the trauma room. And I remember the officer saying, just wait here. And she walks off. And I'm just sitting there thinking, what the fuck just happened? And I remember keep looking at the doorway. And I think, is he going to come? Is he going to come find me? Because throughout this assault, he was constantly letting me know that if I told anybody or if I did anything that made him mad, he was going to hurt me and that he would kill me. So I had all this fear, So eventually a nurse comes out and she says, we'll be right back with you. We're going to take you into a room and but we got to work on some stuff. And I remember her asking if I had a mom, where they were. And, at the time I didn't know what to say. And so things kind of get blurry. And then next, I'm taken into this exam room and they have me get undressed and they have me do, I guess, what they call a SANE exam. They swab me from front to back, inside and out, top to bottom. They had me do photographs, and they never, like, the doctors and the nurse never really explained what they were going to do. They just told me what I needed to do, how I needed to lay. And then, it was just a blur, and I did it all alone. Once they were done, the criminal investigator came in, and once again, he had me get undressed and asked, we need to take photos of your injuries, your body. And I hadn't seen myself, so I didn't know how bad I looked. I didn't know anything. Some of the words that I heard from the police officers, the nurses, were, what were you doing out there? Were you drinking? Why were you drinking with these people? And I at the time I was already feeling awful. I was already feeling really shitty. And with all that added on, I felt even more guilty. And I was alone. Eventually, my aunt showed up. Her and a cousin, they came to pick me up. And the criminal investigator just said, we'll be in touch. My mom at the time was working out of town, so we didn't know how to get in contact with her. Back then we didn't have cell phones, so it was kind of hard. But that's pretty much how my story started. The days after, I went back to my aunt's house and I stayed with her. We were waiting for my mom. But when I think about that time, I spent a lot of time just sleeping. My aunt and my uncle and my cousins were all there, and they were just trying their best to deal with me. They'd tell me to come eat. I'd sit down and I'd try and eat, but I would just think about what happened, what was in my mouth, what I looked like, because the first time I saw myself was after getting back home with my aunt. I remember she took me in the bathroom and she helped me undress and she got me in the shower and she helped me clean myself up, and she helped me clean myself from the inside out. And I remember standing looking at the mirror and just seeing how bad, I looked, how embarrassing the marks that were on me made me feel. And I just kept thinking, like, what is my uncle going to think when he sees me? Or what is my family going to think when they see me because of how I looked? I was very ashamed. I was ashamed of everything that just had happened. So, sitting there trying to eat dinner, eat lunch, be around my family, it was hard. So I would just like get up and walk away, and I would just go lay back down under the blankets and hide. My mom eventually made it, and she was able to comfort me, and we were able to just be there together as a family. My sister made it. She finally was able to come over. And so we were able to just, be all together. And it was like the hardest times. I'm sorry, I'm never really this emotional, but today's hard. And I think about those days, that day, when my mom finally came. I spent so many years just thinking I was alone. And it wasn't just how recent that I realized how comforting my mom was with me that night, those days after. We stayed with my aunt and uncle for a good week, and I felt safe because, this man knew where I live, but he didn't know where my uncle and aunt lived, so it felt really safe. But, life has to continue. And so my uncle, he talked to me and he said, you're going to have to go home. You're going to have to just move on. During this time, I had the criminal investigators come and re-interview me. And it was just kind of like trauma all over again, resharing what happened and them not really explaining to me why they needed to do these things, why they had to re-interview me, why they had to take follow-up photos. So this police report, it was generated. Now I'll talk a little bit more about this a little bit later. So after, going home, that's where, the depression, the anxiety, the shame, nightmares, just the self-blaming, the anger, the hate, the fear, and everything that could possibly happen to somebody that goes through something so traumatic. I went through it. I think my mom tried to help me, but I was just too angry. So I refused any of it. I just became a totally different person than the person that's in the photo that I first shared. Once I started, just kind of disconnecting from my family, I started hanging out with people, my classmates or peers that were close to me that I trusted. And I started, consuming alcohol in large quantities and staying gone for days at a time. I started cutting myself. And I never really thought about killing myself. There were days I felt like I didn't want to be alive anymore. because of what played in my head when I was sober and when I was away from people and had downtime. Because I can't say enough of how much that night played in my head. So when I would cut myself, those times when I'd be just kind of lost, it relieved something in me that, I guess it helped me realize I was still alive and that I could still feel. But that became a good thing, a good ritual that I was taking on. That was so bad. I hid it, I think at one point my mom caught me cutting myself and she got really upset. And so then I started cutting myself in places where nobody can see. And to this day, I still have the scars. And every now and then, when my short pants goes up a little bit high, or maybe I'm drying myself and I see I have those reminders because those scars are still there. Some of the things I dealt with after, with school was just not going to school. A lot of my downtime at school, I'd just be stuck thinking, and, I'd catch myself crying or I'd catch myself getting mad. Teachers would piss me off. They would judge me. They just didn't understand. They didn't know what I was going through. So it was just better I stayed away. I don't know what those days did to my mom, but I can only imagine, because I myself am a mom now, and I couldn't imagine something bad happening to my son or my nieces or, my nephews. So I always think about my mom when I do these presentations, because I know I put her through hell, having her daughter, her 14, 15-year-old daughter disappearing for days at a time, not coming home from school and not coming home at night and not knowing when she's going to show back up, having to worry about, me cutting myself. I was really argumentative and I would fight with my family. It was a horrible time. After that, the police kind of became quiet and I didn't hear from them. But one night, when I was about 16, I was watching TV in the room, and Crime Stoppers commercial came on, and they plastered his picture on the screen because that night that the assault happened, and the police, even though they got there quick, he split, he disappeared, and he was just gone, and nobody ever knew where he went. So on that night, the Crime Stoppers came on, and it was talking about my story, and it put that picture of him, and it said that there was a warrant out for him, and they were looking for tips. And I remember being really upset and angry, and there was also a newspaper article too that was out there that I had seen, and nobody told me that they were going to do this. And I don't think they told my mom either. They just kind of did it themselves. And when I say they, I think it's the FBI that posted that whole thing. But I got really angry, and that was when, everything just kind of came to head. I had a big fight with my mom and my sister. My sister was pregnant at the time, and, I just had it, I had it. I took it out on them, and I got me my pills and my bottle of liquor, and I decided my life was going to end that night. I said, I can't do this no more. Why are they even doing this? What do they care? They didn't care all these years, so why are they trying to do this now? And thankfully, on that attempt at suicide, I wasn't successful. My sister actually is the one that found me, and her and my mom took me to the hospital, and I had to stay there for a couple of days. And they, once I got put in the hospital, my doctor, who kind of knew what was going on with me and had been talking to me for a while, he shows up, and he's upset with me for what I did, and we have a talk, and that's when they said, you're going to go to counseling. So they tried to send me for counseling, but the counseling, I just wasn't ready. I was too angry. I didn't care. It took too long for anyone to try and step in. So it didn't work. I just started blowing off my appointments and just hanging out, doing everything else. So as a result of those ads, it brought his family to contact my family, and they talked to my mom, and wanted to. He I guess supposedly wanted to turn himself in, and his mom was begging. His family was begging for us to not do court and do all these other things. So we started talking with the police again, and then at this time, that's when they had us go talk to the U.S. Attorney's Office. And we get to the U.S. Attorney's Office, and I met the coldest people ever. They made me feel like it was going to be a hard thing to do, testifying in court. And I ended up leaving that session mad, and I just said, screw it, I don't care. Do whatever you want to do. I don't care. I don't want to do this. And I left. And so that's how we left it. And in the end, the U.S. Attorney's Office went ahead and dismissed everything, and it didn't go through court, the federal court system. And that's where the peacemaking court stepped in. Since we weren't going to go through with the court stuff at the federal level, peacemaking here in Shiprock was the alternative. It was a few years ago that I went out searching for these documents, and I actually got them. I actually got that police report, and now that I'm where I'm at in my life, I think about that police report because it was only, I think it was 4 or 5 pages long, and it was just one officer. The report following with the criminal investigators, nobody knows where those reports are. So I don't even know if they exist. I don't know if that's the reason why at the time the U.S. Attorney's Office had no problems with not prosecuting the case, because my thoughts are they got all the fresh evidence off of me within hours. They went to the house and they got all the stuff, like my clothing, the bed. I remember being told that they cut the bed apart because there was so much blood on it. They cut those parts out. So they had evidence. They had all my photos taken before, during, and after the exams and stuff. So with what I found, it just led me to think that maybe they didn't have all that stuff documented, and maybe what I went through was for nothing. And that's why it was easier for them to just go ahead and decline and say, okay, we're not going to take it. But when I look at the peacemaking paperwork, that brought on new emotions for me, because it's worded in such a way that it was stupid. It says no harm or harassment will be directed to Becky or her family. That Becky will continue with her education without fears of any harm from him, and standing in that the support and agreement for her to lead a happy life. I didn't lead a happy life. I dropped out of high school because when all this happened, I dropped out of high school. It was my senior year when we met with the U.S. Attorney's Office. Was actually, if I didn't drop out my senior year, it was actually the day of the graduation that we met with the U.S. Attorney's Office. Thankfully, I did go back to high school and I did finish eventually. But when I look at this paperwork, I laugh so hard and I was like, this is stupid, because everything in there, he didn't abide by. And this is what his family wanted. And he refused to do it. He denies that he sexually assaulted me, or, as in my words, I like to say I was raped, because it was really disgusting, and it wasn't nice. He refused to complete or abide by anything in the agreement. He felt the need to try and get my mom in trouble from her job, because she would go to him and say, you need to fulfill your obligations here. And she did outside work, but him and his family tried to actually get my mom in trouble. And that I didn't find out until years later as well with this paperwork. There was no enforcement, and there was no way to enforce it through peacemaking court. It was just an absolute failure. And he gets to live his life, not labeled that sex offender, and he doesn't get to carry that. I carried the shame for so many years, and he didn't get to. After all of this happened, in 1999, I decided, I had enough of Sheprock, and I didn't really like where things were at. And so I up and moved, and I moved to Phoenix, Arizona. And I started working for a company. And that company offered what they call an employee assistance program, and they offered counseling. So I always deal with and have dealt with night terrors, the depression, the anxiety, the flashbacks. So I decided to try and take advantage of that program, because I wanted to kind of get help. So in 2001, I took advantage of it. I had just met my husband, who was just my boyfriend at the time. So, I felt like I owed it to him to, try and fix me, because I didn't want to be this messed up person forever. And so I started counseling, and it was helping. It helped me to kind of cope, but I still, dealt with my problems with alcohol. When I'd have flashbacks, it would send me spiraling for days. I'd either get super depressed and just want to sleep, or I just disappear and go on a binge and just drink. I just go drink. If I wasn't at work, I was getting drunk, and it wasn't healthy. I started having health issues, and slowly, I was gaining a lot of weight, and I was just a really unhealthy person. I used to take a lot of medications, dealing with my depression, the anxiety, to pain medications, because I was having really bad body pains that they diagnosed as fibromyalgia. I struggled with sleeping, so they gave me stuff to sleep. I had pills to wake me up. I just took pills for everything, and it was like I was just this zombie. And you mix alcohol into it, it was like pretty dangerous. Now that I understand as an adult, some of the dangers that can happen, with some of the medications I used to take, and would take them after a night of drinking, like heavy drinking, I used to be one of those that would just go into blackout mode. But somehow when I get home, I always remember to take out my contacts and take my Ambien pills, you know, and knowing that how many people in this world today, you know, do that same thing, mix that kind of cocktail and don't wake up because of how labored breathing becomes. And you add those to antidepressants, it makes it even worse. So, I spent a few years doing that. I ended up having my son, and, you know, life just kind of changed for the better. I ended up moving back here after my son was born. I moved back here, and I was trying to figure out, you know, how do I live here and how do I live with this man still living in my community? Because on my first times coming back, you know, I ran into him at stores and stuff, and he would follow me. He would, you know, make sure he knew, he made sure that I knew he was there. He would, if he saw me walk into a restaurant, he would make sure he walked up and walked past me so he would know, so I would know he was there. And a lot of the times, you know, I would just get up and leave. My husband at first didn't believe me until he started noticing it, you know, and it became hard for my family because my husband would have to get up and he would, you know, before we'd go into restaurants or to stores, he was always scanning. He was always scanning. And I started to notice that. And there would be times where he'd say, I don't want to eat here, you know, and he'd try and push me out. And I'd be like, what do you mean you don't want to eat here? And he'd be trying to push me out really fast out the door. And then there I'd see, you know, there he is. There are times we'd be sitting eating dinner and our food would just be barely getting there. And there he goes. He would stand right there where I could see. My husband would see him. And then my husband would just say, go out to the car. And just as the server's bringing our food, me and my son are walking out and my husband's like, oh, I'm sorry, we need this to be packed up. We're just going to take it home. And that's where, you know, I had to really think, like, how do I do this? How do I stop letting him win? How do I stop living in fear of him? How is it that he committed the crime and I'm the one that's acting like I'm the criminal? So that's when I decided, you know, I was gonna start sharing my story. I was gonna speak about it. So on this night in November, I put my family to bed and I got my camera out and I just started writing out these cards, and I filmed myself doing just the cards, you know. At the time that was something big, so I did it and I uploaded it, and I think I finished like around 3 a.m. I saved it to my Facebook page and I just hit send and I went to sleep. I remember being really scared and nervous about it. But I eventually fell asleep, and the next day when I woke up, you know, I was scared to look at my Facebook, and I opened it and I was surprised to find, you know, so many positive responses. And that was where I decided to break my silence. And that was a major part for my healing. The video got sent out and people, you know, started reaching out to me, and that's where life changed for me. I started trying to be a healthier person. I started like kind of meeting different people, and that leads me to, you know, Sharon and Dave. Dave at the time was a assistant U.S. attorney with the U.S. Attorney's Office, and Sharon is a victim advocate there. I had met them at a conference for sexual assault. They did a symposium for sexual assault and domestic violence, and they talked about David talked about what he does at the U.S. Attorney's Office and how he fights for victims. And he talked to him and Sharon both kind of bounced off each other, talking about how they've helped so many people. And so I reached out to him, and he called me back a few days later, and we talked about my case. And, I asked if there was any hope in trying to reopen it. And he, said he would look at it, and he ended up talking to me and telling me, he wasn't going to be able to, but he did tell me he was interested in helping me and sharing my story, and he wanted to work with me. And that's where our friendship kind of grew and started. In 2016, they invited me to speak at their conference, and that's where I kind of got the ball rolling with what I do. I go out and I advocate in my community and outside the communities, sharing my story, not just about surviving sexual assault, but mental health issues, suicide prevention. The table that I run with is geared towards the mental health, suicide, and sexual assault prevention. And these guys are the ones that helped me to kind of gain that. Up until from 2013 to 2016, it was hard to break into this realm of sharing and advocating, especially since I didn't work with any kind of like coalitions or groups. It was just me, and I struggled until I met these guys. I share my running because when I started making that change to be healthier, I stopped drinking alcohol and I started running more, and I started finding this the strength, I never knew I had when it came to running, because everything was all up to me. And through the hard times, it was only me that could get me out of it. I'd never been really a runner or anything like that. So it was a hard start, but I ended up finding something that helped me to stay sober and helped me to break free from all the medications I was taking. I actually helped me to no longer depend on things to put me to sleep. It helped me to no longer depend on a pill to make me feel happy, to make me feel numb. It was just an all-around good therapy, and it was free. People say I'm crazy, but it was fun. When I started with the running and getting really big into it, one of the things I wanted to do was do a run, sponsor something for Sexual Assault Awareness Month. And it was funny because I would ask people, like, what do you think? And people would say, oh, it's going to be too hard, or it's going to do this. You can't just put it on. And so my husband, who's like one of my best supporters, he's like, what do you mean it's going to be hard? Look at how so-and-so does it. Let's just do it. And so I thought of Silence No More. And within a few weeks, we had it planned out. I picked a weekend and we put flyers out, and I actually made quilts for prizes because I didn't know what to give for prizes. I felt like we needed to give something. So we made quilts, and I had some of the elders from our community also donate some of their quilts that they handmade. And I thought that was a great gift to give somebody because, blankets are a great form of security. They can comfort you in bad times and fun times and just family time. So that was the reason, the symbol I wanted to give on that. This year would have been our 5th annual. So it's been going on for the past 5 years, but because of COVID, we didn't get to have it this year. We are planning for the next year. One of my favorite sayings is, I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. I think me finding God helped me to be in a better place. It's been a few years that I have accepted him, and I reach out to him. And these are just some photos from our race. Each year we have about 100. We can go from 75 to like 130 people that participate in it. A lot of my goals is just to help other survivors to get to survivor status faster and healthier than me. I do random stuff like this one with the world is better with you in it. You matter. One day it was just like a really heavy day and I made these signs and I stood out at the road by my house and my husband was like, "What are you doing today?" You know, he just thinks I'm crazy, but like I stood there at the road and I was like holding that sign up and people were honking and coming back and talking to me, saying thank you. I just do random stuff. The poster on the side, I did that with IHS as a program for, it was like a campaign on suicide prevention and it's just called Love Your Life 102. We did a video as well. This is just a small clip of that video. We're all normal when one experiences a traumatic event. The counselors helped me in different ways using different tools. I began to heal and accept what happened to me when I was 13. I felt more at ease with life and found my husband, and the baby followed. I continued with counseling when I could to try and learn to handle my new life. In 2010, I made the decision to move back to Shiprock. It was during this time I began to make my peace with my rape. I had spent my life from the age of 13, angry, sad, scared, dirty, and ashamed. It was time to change and cross over from victim to survivor. I forgave my attacker in my heart and gave it all to God. I accepted the scars on the inside and out. My next steps were to speak out about my rape. I decided I would no longer be silent, and I wanted to share my story with others. On May 3rd, 2015, after running the Shiprock Half Marathon, I had my last alcoholic drink. I spent many years abusing alcohol to hide from the pain and to disappear from life. I now am sober and learning to handle life struggles without drinking. I have a purpose, and that is to share with others that there is life after a traumatic event. Counseling works, healing is possible, and sobriety is awesome. Suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. That was a video I did with them. You can go on to YouTube and look at the video if you want and share it. I'd like it. There's other videos there too from other people. This actually was a billboard. You know, one of the things I wanted was I told myself I want to be on a billboard in Shiprock because I felt like, you know, that was some kind of an empowerment towards me because he would have to drive through and he would have to see that billboard and remember what he did to me and see that he didn't win. So I just made that happen and I'm forever grateful for that. They set it up in the middle of town for a few months. And this is just my support system, Sharon and Dave. My mom and my sister, my running family, they keep me motivated and they keep me happy. My husband, he's probably gonna hate me if he sees that sucking up buttercup photo, but I don't say he's my best friend, but he definitely is my rock. He's the best supporter I could ever have. He allows me to go out and to do the things I do. He's always there to help me when I host events. If I do my free giveaways or whatever it is I'm doing in the community, he's always there in the background helping. He drives with me and, you know, he just gives me the freedom to do what I want to do and to do the things I want to do. He always tells me, I'll give you chip and pop money. Just make sure you come home. He's a great guy. These are the people I lean on. Some of the best friends I have. When I talk about the people who support me in my darkest times, it's these two. I still deal with flashbacks. I still deal with nightmares. I still deal with night terrors. And these two are the ones that answer my phone calls in the middle of the night, middle of the day. Doesn't matter. They answer my call. And when they know I'm struggling, they come. Doesn't matter the time of day, they come and they sit and they hold my hand. They drive hours to get to me if they need to. I like this photo. It's me and my mom on my 43rd birthday. We went hiking. They took this photo. It means so much because, I put her through hell. And I always said I was alone, but reality is I wasn't. She's always been there to hold my hand, and I'm so thankful I still have her. I'm thankful she's there to hold my hand on those nights I can't sleep. Those nights when I'm so afraid that he's right there at my house and he's gonna kill me. She sits with me. She prays with me. Learning to live, forgive, and just be happy. Forgiveness, I completed about 1.5 years ago. I had to learn how to make my own forgiveness. And yeah, I forgave him, and he no longer holds me in fear. And I've learned to just leave it to God. I spent so many years angry, wishing bad things, wishing things that make me a bad person. But now, I did a lot of just praying about, and I just said, there's 3 people that know the truth. That's me, him, and God. And I don't need to say his name. I don't need to tell people or defend my claims anymore, because at the end of the day, God's the only one that can judge. And at the end of his life, he will face the ultimate judger, and that's God. So that alone was freeing for me. Society tells me forgiveness means I don't talk about it anymore, or I don't cry about it, or I don't feel anger or anything about sexual assault. But that's not true. Forgiveness is letting that part that pulls you down in a dark place. That's what forgiveness is. It's letting go of that. It doesn't mean you have to forget, because sexual assault is a life sentence. You just have to learn to accept it. And you have to learn how to deal with it in a healthy way so that you don't hurt yourself. And if you can handle that, then you can live a happy life. And that's what I do. I used to be a really negative person, but I no longer am negative. I'm just happy. It doesn't mean I don't have days where I'm sad. I don't have days where I'm super depressed still, because I still do. I still have days where I sleep because I just can't handle it. But I handle it in a healthier way. I'll share some of my favorite pictures. Me in nature, I just like being out there. I like seeing the beauty. Thank you for joining me today.